Hi everybody, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to take you along on our plum journey as we pick our very own plums and tell you what we're going to do with them. So we've been really lucky this year with plums. We have two plum trees that produce this one over here, which was ready quite a bit earlier, and we've already picked and made plum butter from these ones. But right now we're out picking plums off of this tree and yeah, they're gorgeous. Like, not all of them, I mean some of them, there's quite a few blemishes, but we already have this huge, oh my gosh, that's heavy, basket full of plums. And so we're getting those off the tree. Careful, don't drop them. So our thought is that we're going to obviously save, like the ones near the bottom here are still not ripened. So we're gonna leave those on for eating at a later time. But the ones nearest to the top are very, very ripe. And we're picking those today, and I think we're gonna do plums in syrup. So once we get all of these picked and into the house, I will show you what that looks like. So this is the recipe we're gonna be using. It's a plums in syrup. We are not gonna peel them. We are just gonna cut them in half, pit them, and use a light syrup. Okay, so it is in this book. If you don't already have this book, the Ball Complete Book of Home Preserving, you need this. However, if I can find the recipe online, I will link it in the description below so you guys have it. But like I said, we're just going to do plums and syrup so we can enjoy. Ended up being 30 pounds of plums. We can enjoy these all winter long. So right now what I'm doing is just preparing our plums. All we're doing is cutting them in half. I'm going to take the pits out. You can can plums whole. It says that you have to kind of prick a hole in them so they don't explode in the jars. But because we don't spray our trees, our plums do have some blemishes. So I'll just go in and like just cut that out, right? That's it. And then I'm putting them in a solution of a little bit of lemon water just so they don't go brown. Obviously we have a lot to work through. After we're about halfway through this, I think that's when we'll start warming up the canner, washing in, getting the jars ready, and getting our syrup ready. So we're working on our first round of plums. We are doing the raw pack method. So the plums have just been sitting in the lemon water so they don't start going brown on us. And we opted to do a honey syrup. It smells so good. So we think that's going to be a great flavor with the plums. So Paul's in charge of filling the jars. And I'm in charge of putting the syrup on, wiping that rim. If you haven't watched my video on the #1 reason for seal failure, I recommend you check that out. I'll link that for sure. And how long is the processing time for these ones? It was 20 minutes.
20 minutes.
Yeah, so it'll be 20 minutes for us to process these. Again, we're doing raw pack and not hot pack.
So, what are you doing now?
I'm using a chopstick to kind of slide and wiggle down the side of the jar to get out any air bubbles. So you don't want to use something metal to do this, of course, because the syrup was just brought to a boil. And I'm just sliding along the sides and getting any air bubbles that might be in there, because that can sometimes interfere with the canning process. All right, so now they're heading into the canner. This was one of the best investments I ever made. I got myself a stainless steel canner. Holds 10 jars, which was a game changer because my other one only held 7. Unfortunately, because I am the klutz that I am having to use an old canner lid because this one came with a glass lid, and I may or may not have dropped it and had it shatter all over my kitchen floor. But still, 10 jars in a water bath canner, that's pretty awesome. I have a curiosity question. So whenever we're canning, we always listen to music. Of course, when we're filming, we turn it off because YouTube doesn't like that. What kind of music do you listen to when you're canning? This summer, we have been doing a lot of musicals. So right now we have the soundtrack to The Greatest Showman on. We also like Pitch Perfect, and we've been listening to some, not all of the songs from Eurovision. There's a couple that make me twitch when we listen, but comment below. Let me know. Do you listen to music? And if so, what kind? It's almost 24 hours later, which means I'm going to be taking all the rings off of these and washing my jars. Now, something I've gotten into the habit of doing is after my jars are out of the canner, about an hour later, I'm checking those seals right away. The jars are a little hot, but I've found within about an hour, if your jars haven't sealed, they're not going to. And honestly, there's nothing worse than realizing 24 hours later that you have a seal failure, and now that food has been sitting out on the counter for 24 hours, which in my world means it's spoiled and it can't be used. And so I like to check it within an hour and then make a mental note of any of the ones that didn't seal, set those aside, wait for them to cool, and then tuck them in the fridge. So at least we don't waste the food. So I'm going to turn the camera back around, show you the jars one more time. So my experience is whenever you're canning anything in a syrup, you're gonna have some leakage. So for proper storage of these, it's really, really, really important that you take the rings off and you wash all of these jars thoroughly. I never store any of my canned goods with the rings on. I always make sure they're off. And by washing these jars really well, you're gonna prevent any mold and bacteria and like gross stuff from growing in your jars while they're in your pantry. So that's my job for today, is getting all these jars washed, of course, cleaning my counter, as you can see. Now this is also something that's really normal when you raw pack, that your fruit's gonna float to the top. This is just part of the process. Now I've never had it so cloudy before, but this is also the first time I've ever canned with a syrup that had such a high honey content. So like I said, my job today, maybe Kiddo will help me. That face, I don't know, I'm not so sure. But my job is that I'm going to clean these jars and then I'm going to label them. I've gotten into the habit too of labeling the top of my jars with a Sharpie. So then I'm not tempted to reuse those lids. I know lots of people who do reuse their canning lids. If you've had great success with that, awesome. I just don't want to risk it. There's only so much fridge space. So that's what I'm going to be working on today. We've managed to get 20 jars done, which we're really happy about. About a third of the basket still needs to ripen. So I'll be back to canning, I'm sure, at some point this week. And I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm just going to can them in syrup just because I don't need any more butter and I don't need any more jam in my pantry this year.
Well, it's official. The jars are washed and I did none of it. I did not help, not one bit at all. Goodbye.
But he did design a really super cool roller coaster, and we incorporated geography into it, so that was kind of neat. All right, I want to know what is happening in your kitchens right now. What are you preserving? Are you freeze drying, vacuum sealing, water bath canning, pressure canning? Are you using your dehydrator? I want to hear all about it. If you're making freezer meals, leave that in the comments below. Now, of course, this was not a full tutorial on how to can plums and syrup. It's really easy though, and I have linked Practical Self-Reliance's blog post, which is basically the exact recipe from Bernardin and Ball. So that's in the description. You guys, you got to scroll down, find the description. People are often looking for the links. That's where they are. I also have links to tons of freebies, including the very first magazine edition of My Grounded Home. If you're looking for a homesteading community, this is a great resource for you. So check that out too. I am, of course, happy to answer any questions you might have about this particular canning process. Just drop those comments. And until next time, this is Corinne from Spirea Herbs, wishing you health, wellness, and happy preserving.